Vienna is a 4-room stone cottage with a detached kitchen wing built later than the main house.
Vienna is an extraordinary example of community action for conservation.
It was a very typical late 19th century house with a picket fence.
I also remember many times inside the house looking at the ceiling with literally the plaster falling down.
A large element of it is the original 1871 house.
And we felt it was worthwhile trying to save something basic, something that was a tradesman, workman's kind of cottage rather than the grand villa.
Hunters Hill was developed very largely by Frenchmen who built large buildings for the rich, the professional people, as a respite away from the city. It's really the first garden city. This subdivision that Vienna stands on was the first small subdivision and became part of what was called the village precinct.
It's one of about 52 small stone cottages in Hunters Hill, stone being a very prominent building material here. In that range of stone houses, Vienna is at the top end. It's a more fashionable and smarter and better built cottage than most of the others.
The Hillmans, I think, had quite a comfortable life. John Jacob Hillman was a bootmaker and a lamplighter in Hunters Hill, and his wife was a dairymaid and kept cattle and chooks and things like that.
Hunters Hill is a remarkable heritage area. It has a rich collection of early buildings, stone buildings, a wonderful ambience. But of course the irony is, as those qualities become more and more desirable, as property values go up, buildings aren't just left as is, they become gentrified. And because of the peculiarity of history, where Vienna had a protected tenancy, it survived remarkably intact. And a group of citizens recognised that. They understood how precious it was, how, unless the property passed into some form of public ownership, it simply wouldn't be preserved.
Well, my earliest recollections of Vienna in the early 80s was meeting up with a local identity here called Philip Jenkin, and he was keen to have a bicentennial project.
We saw Rosamond, which was a little cottage, and then we found Vienna. Because Vienna was incredible. In those days, when it rained, the water poured in through the slate roof. It was condemned. In many respects, it was a disaster. But anybody who came into Vienna in those days fell in love with it.
Well, Philip Jenkin and myself actually ended up purchasing the property, and then of course we had to raise the funds to conserve it and eventually have this property put in the name of the National Trust of Australia.
However, once they'd got hold of the property, that was when the real issues started. And there was a great cleavage between those who felt that the house should be preserved as is, the Spartan cottage with its peeling paint and sparse furnishings should be kept the way the last tenant, George Anderson, had had it. And those who felt that the right way to go was to have a romantic reconstruction of the mid-Victorian cottage.
Initially, when it was first purchased, it was thought that the cottage might be brought back to the late 19th century. This would have involved removing the windows that were inserted in the walls in the 1920s. It was the appreciation of these windows indicating a change in the appreciation of light levels that was one of the things that the chairman of the committee, Philip Jenkin, greatly appreciated. Philip thought that Vienna very well represented how every house adjusts to the flavour of the times, albeit in a minimal way. And Vienna represents that sort of minimal change approach.
So a lot of the work here has actually been a very, very careful repair of the existing fabric. And the builder who did the work did these very, very careful repairs, taking things apart carefully, patching them, and then putting them back together again with a minimum amount of new material. The bits of missing paint on the wall were in-painted. There were careful repairs done to the plasterwork. A new damp course was put in the stonework, and injected damp course throughout the house. The repair of the kitchen wing and the laundry wing followed the same example. In fact, the copper in the laundry was put back together again. It had partially collapsed. The chimney was rebuilt using the old bricks, but according to its old configuration. All the old weatherboards were put back on the wall. On the front veranda, only 3 sheets of iron were inserted. The original iron from the late 19th century is still in place. The decorative valance around the veranda is all intact, and what bits are missing were missing at the time we started the works. The internal colour schemes in the house presented a real dilemma, similar to the outside one. We had the colour schemes from the Anderson occupation, which were very, very plain. And it was clear, like in the front hall, that there had been more elaborate decorative schemes there. When the bathroom was installed, when people started to actually build bathrooms in houses rather than have a moving, a tub that you bring into a room, one of these box rooms was turned into a bathroom and then later extended. And the evidence for this 2 stages of work can be seen in the weatherboards and the line of cut in the weatherboards on the outside of the building. Other aspects of the repair of the place was the retention of as much as possible of the original fabric. If you look around the windows, you'll see very small and detailed repairs as well, where just a careful patch has been done. The non-Hills hoist in the backyard is quite intriguing in that it is a homemade version of a Hills hoist. This whole project has been very much an essay in patching, and it's continued something which has happened over probably the life of the house.
There is one part of this cottage that is real living history, and that is the back section. Because the back section was where George Anderson, who was a tenant from the 1940s when his mother and family came into Vienna, that's where he was living, in the back section. So it's got his furniture, it's got his furnishings, it's got his leather strap still in the bathroom. It's got a lot of things that are George's, and that is fair dinkum. It's the history, it's real.
I don't think George really could understand the interest in the cottage and the desire of the people in the district to save it as it has been saved. I think it was a bit of a mystery to him that he saw it as a dump, and he was happy to live there the way he had been living, but I don't think he had a strong sense of the heritage value of this particular house. It was his home.
One of the wonderful things about George's occupation of this house was that he didn't throw things away. And when parts fell off this building, George actually put them aside. There was a problem in providing for a museum use when the most intact story was George's, that we could not really present George's occupation as part of the museum thing that we came to look at, because it was somewhat voyeuristic. So it was a very, very careful balance between the needs of the museum and also George's needs and his own privacy. I think it's most important to realise that when the museum was set up, it was not meant to last forever, particularly here. It was very much an interim measure, and it was to be reassessed, and we should be doing this.
It's time that the people in Australia started to appreciate simple, humble examples of our earlier architecture.
It's all there. This tells the story of a house from 1871 to date, and it's all can be read. You might have to have a helping hand with a booklet or some kind of an indicator, but it's all there for you to discover.